All right, guys, it's history time for the week. I guess I don't need this since we're not covering the American Revolution anymore, but we are covering the Constitution, the way it's set up, the three branches of government, and what was added to it, the Bill of Rights and amendments. So, after the Articles of Confederation, people in the 13 colonies got together and decided they needed a new government. So they wrote a constitution, and there was a lot of arguing back and forth, but they finally came up with what we have today. We've talked about this quite a bit this year because, well, there was an impeachment trial, and we've talked about what that meant, and what powers of government each part of government has. So let's just start very simply with our Constitution. Our Constitution is the document that tells us how to run our country, how our government should run, how laws should be written, how things are determined. Most countries, almost every country now has a constitution. Not always, but now almost every country. Some countries are monarchs with constitutions, some are dictatorships with constitution. We have a democracy with a constitution. Some would argue not a full democracy, but still a democracy. It's a representative democracy, which means we vote people in and they make decisions for us. It would be really hard to have an actual democracy. That means everybody vote on everything. The only time that really ever happened was in ancient Greece, and even then not everybody voted. It was just rich males who own land, but they all got a vote. But that's just difficult in large society, so you have to have representative governments that vote for you, and we vote for the representatives. So, okay, our Constitution has 5 parts. The first 2 parts of the Constitution, and I might get them wrong in how they're written, I didn't look it up before I did this, but is the power of the states and the power of the federal government. So the Constitution says states have certain rights and get to do certain things. Remember, the Articles of Confederation, the central government or the federal government didn't have much power at all. It couldn't raise taxes. States could raise taxes. It couldn't really form a military, anything like that. Well, our Constitution sets up what states and what the federal government can do. That's the first part of it. I believe it's the first part. I might have this wrong, but you guys can check for me and let me know in the comments. But it does say, federal governments can raise tariffs, right? That means taxing things that are coming in from other countries. The federal government can raise a military. Okay, states can't do that. States, though, have to decide local things. It's hard for the federal government to know where we should build a dam or where we should, put stop signs in, where we should have schools. So states do that. So it's a separation of powers. Okay, well, I'm not going to go too much into that, but I do want to go a bit into our 3 branches of government. So the other parts of the Constitution talk about the 3 branches of government and what powers each of those branches have. So we'll just start at the 3. It was judicial, legislative, and executive, and we've covered this several times. So the judicial branch is the ones who interpret the law. So we're going to look at it like that. And when you think of judges, all judges are part of the judicial branch, but really we have federal judges and state judges. But really when we talk about this, we're talking about the Supreme Court. And this is people who get voted, appointed by the president and then voted by Congress, and they serve for life or as long as they want. Some retire, some die in office. But they can't be pushed out of office. This is to prevent political pressure. So now they're in and they make decisions. They make decisions whether a law matches up with our Constitution. So recently something that came up was with our isolation. Wisconsin had a vote. They were going to vote, and people in Wisconsin sued the state of Wisconsin, saying that it was unconstitutional for them to have a vote when it was dangerous with the sickness, coronavirus going around. So the judicial branch actually, or the Supreme Court, voted that it was okay. And not everybody agreed with that, but we have a very conservative Supreme Court right now, which means most of the majority of the Supreme Court is mostly Republican nominated and voted in. So they have the majority in the court. So they tend to be more conservative, more on that side of politics right now. Therefore, in Wisconsin, because, even President Trump said, Republicans do better when they suppress the vote. He said it. So, so that's the judicial branch. Now, legislative branch, we have two parts of our legislative branch, and the Constitution goes into that. We have the Senate, and we have the House of Representatives. Now, we have that because when the country was founded, and I said this in the last lecture, we had states that wanted to have representative based on population, but some states felt that wasn't fair because they didn't have a huge population. Like New York was industrial and had a lot of towns, so it had a large population, where someplace like Virginia was agricultural. It didn't have a large population. So there was a compromise. They made two houses of government. Other governments have two houses. England has a parliament with two houses. The Lords and the Commons is what they call them, and theirs is separated by class. You have the people who are born in upper class, the Lords, and then the Commons, the commoners. I don't know how well that sticks today, but that's where it was originated. So we have the legislative branch. They write laws, and they have the power to change the Constitution, but the president has to agree with it. But if he does veto, which the president can veto things, the Congress with a certain percentage can pass things without the president's approval. Okay, now the executive, that's our president. Now that they have their own powers. Now in the Constitution, it sets up who has what powers. So I'm not going to go into too much. Just know executive, it kind of enforces laws, we could say. That's a simple way of putting it. Military writes the laws, interprets the laws. That's kind of the simplest way. And that's what, at this point, 10 years old, it's probably what you should think. Enforces, writes, interprets. Okay? That's the three branches of government. I'm not going to go too much in depth in this lecture because it's Easter and I'm cooking a leg of lamb and I'm hungry. So we'll just finish this up. All right. Bill of Rights. Okay, so they wrote the Constitution, but they realized it didn't cover everything. But the Constitution, what's great about our Constitution is we can change it. It can be changed. So a few years after the Constitution, I think 10, I'm not sure. You guys look this stuff up. I didn't memorize this before I went to the lecture time. It's been a busy weekend. But Bill of Rights was the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, first 10. Okay, you have like the right, you've all heard it, the right to bear arms, the Second Amendment, okay, that's in the Bill of Rights. You can interpret it many different ways, we won't get into that. I'm sure everybody has their opinion on it. The right to free speech, the right to assembly, and so on. Matter of fact, I'm going to have you guys as a challenge this week to look up and list the first 10 amendments and maybe write a sentence or two why they're important. All right, so this is what we're covering this week. So these are the important points. 5 parts of the Constitution, the states, federal, 3 branches of government, judicial, legislative, executive, interprets the laws, writes the laws, executes the laws. Not always, though. We can talk about that some other time. There's some presidents who refused to do that and might argue this one too. Bill of Rights, first 10 changes or amendments to the Constitution. All right, well, I hope you guys are all doing well. I will see you Monday, and hopefully I'll have this posted. Bye.